the one and only Jeremy Coney has joined us for the next half an hour as the start of play has been delayed. Jeremy Coney, MBE, recipient of the NZ Commemoration Medal, a qualified teacher, a fine musician, former newsreader, all-rounder, captain of New Zealand. There isn't much this man hasn't done in his 72 years. And we're not going to have a chance to talk about all of it, Jeremy. Also, player of 52 Test matches and 88 one-day internationals. Led New Zealand to their first ever Test series win in England in 1986. And in his 15 tests as captain, lost only one series away in Pakistan. And touring Pakistan in the mid-80s was not the experience that it is these days. And he wasn't the only captain to lose a series in Pakistan. I might be tempted to ask you how many LBWs you and your bowlers managed to win, Jeremy, in that series.
We found it very difficult to get Javed Miandad LBW.
He was never LBW in Pakistan.
Well, there we are. Okay, I didn't know that, but certainly, I only knew that we didn't get him out at any stage. In fact, quite often a caught behind. That was my worst little moment as a captain, actually. We had got to the point in the last Test match where John Bracewell was bowling and he did nick the ball. And everybody went up because he was such a good player, such a brilliant player. And he was given not out. And there was dissatisfaction, let's put it that way, and discontent was rife amongst the Kiwis. And I almost started to lead the New Zealand team off the ground, saying, look, we've had enough. We've gone too far. And thankfully, John Wright came over to me and just grabbed me and said, look, we can't do this. And he was absolutely right. And I was starting to take the decisions a little bit more personally than I should have. And so we went back. Of course we did. And the game went on. It was a draw at the last test. And so that was probably my worst moment, I think, where I was going to make a really bad decision.
So you might just have preceded Mike Gatting and Shakil Rana.
I think that might have been, yeah. We were there in '84, I think. I think he was just a little bit after when he had the same
you may just have set the precedent.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
with a walk-off.
But we didn't have a walk-off. No, it wasn't a walk-off. It was the start, I've got to say. But that was enough. So we turned around.
So it's so Jeremy Coney of you to start with one of the lowlights.
It was really.
Well, what about the 1979-80 Test Series win against the West Indies? That was extraordinary. And we must talk about winning in England for the first time as well in 1986. But that West Indies series was, in terms of shock and unpredictability and in terms of an upset in Test cricket, I don't know if anybody saw that coming. That was extraordinary. West Indies at their absolute height, beaten in New Zealand.
Yes, and a young New Zealand side. Jeff Howarth had just been made captain of the team, and a little youthful band of followers, I guess that's how you would describe us, all starting out kind of together. Obviously, Richard had been there a little bit longer. They'd been at 73. He began, and was already obviously a very classy medium-fast bowler. But he was our only one, of course, and so the West Indies came from Australia after winning comfortably there. Viv Richards was not in the team. He went back home for whatever the reason was. But they were still very, very strong, both in bowling and batting. Desmond Haynes, Greenwich, and what the side people will remember. Our first test was in Otago, down at Carisbrook, no longer a test ground in New Zealand. It's actually a sort of a semi-industrial area if you go past it nowadays. And poor old Bert Sutcliffe, one of the people I admire greatly as a sort of post-war batsman, left-hander, beautiful batsman. Never played a winning test in 42 tests, and he's buried there. Part of him is buried there, and they can't find it at the moment. They can't find his ashes, and that's quite sad, really, as it's changed from a ground into a semi-industrial area. As I say, they can't find it. They've been over it, but they can't find it.
Was he there to witness your the series win was Bert.
Oh yes, he
there in
was.
79,
Yes,
80.
he was.
Yeah, yeah. So he never played in a winning
test.
in
He started in 47 and he went right through to 65. So it's a long time he played. Brilliant player. You know, I mean, I don't have all the details. If you look it up, you'll find that he's scored so many hundreds. But it's the manner in which he scored. He opened the batting. He was very good in the covers. He was good just at bat pad. He was good in the cordon. Just a natural athlete. And one of those players, you will have seen Martin Crowe play. But there are some people in cricket that you gauge their ability by looking up at the scoreboard. I was one of those. An accountancy kind of look at the innings that where you are. But there are those other players in cricket who are aesthetically pleasing on the eye, that the movement burns itself into your mind and it remains there. And whether they get 23 or whether they get 45 or 110, you've got those pictures in your mind. If you love the game, you've got those images with you forever. And Martin Crowe was one of those. Bert was one of those. And so he was always anyway. So that match, when we played them in 79-80, the ball kept very low. If you look at it, you'll find there'll be loads of LBWs, but you only had to pitch it straight, and if it kept down and squatted on you, if you didn't get your bat down, then there were plenty of fast bowlers, I can tell you, in that match. I can't remember the details. I remember the highlights, which probably people do remember. I remember facing Garner and Michael Holding, and I don't think, you'd have to look up and see, but I know that Derek Parry played, who was an off spinner, and I was batting with Lance Cairns, Chris Cairns' dad, an in-swing bowler and a wholehearted player and a big hitter. And I said to Cairnsy, now, what I think we should do here, Cairnsy, is what we would call as a batsman, milk him. Milk him. Knock him round, get 3 runs and over. Keep him on.
Don't hit him out the attack.
Yeah, that's right. Well, whack. First ball, out of the ground, onto the road beyond the stand. I said, did you not hear me, Lance? Yeah, I heard you. That's how he spoke, because he was in the freezing works, and he had become very deaf with the high pressure hosing and so on that they had there, and so his speech had been affected. So I heard you. And next ball, he forward defence, given the thumbs up like that and that sort of thing, and then whack, another one disappearing over the. So he was taken off after 2. That was terrific, Kenzie. Well done. Thanks very much. Here comes Michael again. You know, and actually, speaking about Michael, of course, he kicked the stumps over, didn't he?
Yes, well, exactly. I was going to ask you.
Great photo, wasn't it?
Absolutely magnificent. I mean,
it took 3 days to get it. A guy down at Third Man got it, a little amateur photographer. He took that photo, and finally it came into the world press.
So was the sense of history and achievement and the celebration marred by the fact that it was quite a controversial tour? And I mean, I won't say it was sort of played in poor spirits or there was bad blood around, but the West Indies were very, very frustrated. And I think, I mean, we smile a little bit about the umpiring in Pakistan, but they also felt that there may have been
I think wherever you went,
umpiring,
wherever you went, Manners, it was home umpires in those days, wasn't it? Obviously, and I thought generally, I didn't think our lads cheated. That wasn't ever a question in my mind. They were just incapable. These fast bowlers were too fast. And the decisions they were having to make were so quick, they just weren't quite up to it. And I know Jeff Howarth went to Clive Lloyd, who was the captain of the West Indies, I think in the second test at Christchurch. We'd won the first test by the worst 2-leg byes you've ever seen taken in the history of the game, with Stephen Bock. With his pad, the top part, his flap of his pad, flapping up and down, slowing him down. It wasn't streamlined at all. And so they got 2 leg buys to get us over the line.
Probably made of horsehair, were
Yeah,
they?
well, yes, those old ones. Yeah. I know, those heavy on the legs and smelt a bit in your kit. And so, yeah, so we'd won at 9 down against the West Indies, and so a very tight match and trying to get about 104. And I remember standing by Frank Cameron, who was the selector. He was a former fast bowler in New Zealand, but he's now a selector. And he was so excited to win. He leapt up in the air and he cut right across the collar tie, because down under the stand at Carisbrook in those days, it had sawdust. You know, when they'd had a good year at Otago Cricket Association, the OCA, because they'd renewed the sawdust under the stand, and you know, and you'd walk past and there'd be a scrum machine down there, you know, and there would be Jazz Muller, who was one of our props in the All Blacks, his jockstrap hanging over this, you know, a testament to the way the All Blacks used to practice their scrums and so on. And there was a labyrinth of changing rooms that you'd go through, and finally, because Lance Cairns got hit at one stage as well and was knocked out. And look, it was just a terrific. I mean, there were so many things happening, as I remember now. Poor old Lancer, he went down, wasn't wearing a helmet when he went out and got hit, and down he went. Big noise, and it's always a comfort when you're walking out. Of course, the number 11 walking out when the guy's being carried off ahead of you, just in the other direction.
The first time I went to Carisbrook for a one-day international, the sport, I suppose, cricket was made to feel like a little bit of a magpie, because the day before the rugby posts were still up at Carisbrook. No, I promise you.
Right.
And they were only taken down on the afternoon before the one-day international. So you had the cricket ground staff preparing the pitch with the rugby posts still up, and you were very conscious that you were playing on a rugby ground.
Oh, yes,
you
definitely.
were borrowing.
Well, most of them were.
You were just visitors.
Most of them were. You're absolutely right. I mean, I was born in Wellington at a very early age, and I wanted to be an All Black. Any boy in the 50s in my era, they were, to be obsessed with the All Blacks was natural and wholesome, and we used to play rugby every Thursday as a family. You know, and that's what I wanted to do, and we would get neighbours in, and we'd sort of co-opt a few people around. You get 7 versus 7, that sort of thing. And Dad very smartly bought a place with a tennis court out the back, so that's where we used to play our Thursdays. And they as I remember, they were pretty tough games of rugby. I mean, Dad was a fringer, always just on the margins of the contact zone. And then I had 2 older brothers, memorably vicious, and I didn't get on with them so well. They didn't like me, and I didn't like them.
They took the opportunity to tackle you.
Oh, absolutely, they were into me, but you know, they were family, and you never know when you might need a new kidney. And then Mum was outstanding. She was in the tight. She would wrestle the ball down, and she was great. She took a few blows, and we thought that she got sort of, I think, concussion for a week or two. We had to move her from tight head prop to loose head, and it ruined our ball. But but I wanted to be a rugby player, and I found out quite early I wouldn't be. And then so sport was part of my life, and I then walked up the road to Onslow Club, which was my nearest club, and I was placed. I must have been 8 or 9, and I was placed in a thing called the Leftovers. That was my first team. Well, everybody else had a team, and there was the rabble over there under the tree. You're the leftovers, play amongst yourselves. And so that's where I started.
You described Bert Sutcliffe and Martin Crowe as natural athletes, but that is exactly the way that you're described by your peers and your teammates. I mean, your nickname, if nickname is the right word, is the Mantis.
Yes,
and,
I think that's because of my limbs.
Well, yes, your long limbs, but also very sharp reflexes at slip, and I mean, you always play your lithe athleticism down, and you tell very amusing stories about your lack of prowess in the covers. But in fact, that's the opposite is true. I mean, you were a very, very good slip fielder. I know you've got long arms and long legs, but you were very, very much an athlete as well, and also the captaincy, Jeremy. We talk about I mean, Stephen Fleming was regarded as innovative and creative. Martin Crowe before him, using Deepak Patel as an opening bowler in the '92 World Cup, and so there was this from Crowe. I don't know before, but yes, Stephen Fleming certainly, and New Zealand. You've often said, well, they've got to be creative with their resources because they don't have as many resources as other teams. But you were quite a long way ahead of your time, and you are perhaps not given enough credit for the different strategies and approaches that you employed, field placings as well. Did you give that a great deal of thought, or was that just instinctive?
I was kind of an intermediary, if I'm really honest, and that's how I sort of looked at it. I fitted in between Jeff Howarth, who had been there for some years, played at Surrey, of course, for a long time, and then when he finished, they were trying to work out who would be captain before really passing over to Martin Crowe, who was probably, as it happened, it was his brother Jeff Crowe who came before Martin, but who was a very good captain too, Jeff Crowe, but he couldn't quite stay in the side getting enough runs. It's one of the main things as a captain, I think. You must earn your place in the team and get your runs and do your job in order to remain there, first of all as a player. And so I was only there really for a few years in between. And I was lucky and fortunate, I think, in the sense that Richard was right at his best. I mean, he was an outstanding bowler. We used to argue. I wouldn't kid anybody to think that everything was rosy in the garden all the time. I wanted to challenge him and push him, and he was ready to go there too. And look, I mean, that series we won, the first series in Australia, when we went to win in Australia, to me, stands out as the place to really win a series that says that you're a serious team. And Richard he got 33 wickets, I think, in 3 tests, 11 a match, 5 in one innings and then 6 in the next, on average. And of course he got more than that. He got 9 in the first innings, as some of people will remember listening, and that was at the Gabba. And so he was the heart and soul of our performance over there. But we relied, and we sort of thought, well, I did, where is Richard going to get? In New Zealand, of course, the main place, because we grow grass and we're basically a farm, New Zealand, and we grow grass well. So we had seam bowling attacks, the same as England do. That's what's so hard for us playing them here, because it's just like English conditions. And so whatever we prepare for against England, it's going to suit them. So that's one of the difficulties of bringing England out of all the countries we play against. England are the toughest. But certainly that series, Hadley, the places where you're going to get him out, get wickets, Richard, slip. And we trained and we talked about what are the techniques we need to use. I see mistakes in the field. I see players with their legs too wide apart because you can't move. You've got to unweight, and they often put their hands on their knees, which drives the weight into your heels. You've got to be ready to make an athletic movement as a slip fieldsman. So you want to be on the balls of your feet, not on your heels. You want to be a dancer. You know, you're ready to go. You want to be, I don't know, a boxer. There again, they're on the balls of their feet. They're moving. And so that's what a slip should be. And I don't see it enough, to be honest. I see their depth is too deep quite often.
It just takes one person.
And it goes
to
on
change,
and on. Do you know what I
it?
mean?
It's all Ian Botham's fault, because he used to stand
very
with
close,
his hands on his knees.
Very close.
And he was a brilliant slip fielder, but he was the exception that proves the rule. I mean, as you say, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, and be Muhammad Ali in the slips, but without the gloves. Preferably. So, Jeremy, 1986. Well, actually,
so that was 85, 86,
yeah,
something like that.
The two tours to England. The previous one, 83, 84.
Yes.
When you batted 8 hours, made 174 not out to save a Test match. That was congratulations. It took you a long time to get to 100,
It
didn't it? I think
did.
you'd scored a dozen 50s before your first 100.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Will Young. I'm watching Will Young. He stays out there. He looks quite composed and quite calm, and technically it's difficult to get him out, but he just doesn't quite know how to make a big total yet. I thought it might have been yesterday.
That, do you?
Eh?
You recognise
I do.
that phenomenon?
Totally, I do. And I've got to say that pitch was pretty flat, and we were batting to save the game. We didn't bat very well first. England got big runs and a big lead, so it was a case then of, well, we've got to get a very big total to make this safe. And so I could bat and bat and bat, and luckily enough, I did.
Quite unusual, having not reached 100, to then having breached the three-figure mark, to then bat for another 3 hours and finish 174 not out. But then a couple of years later, the real highlight, the first win in England in 1986.
We won in 1983. We were starting to win one test.
Yeah.
One little isolated match.
You won the series in 86. That was the first series, yeah.
Yes.
But you did win.
In 83, we won at Leeds, at Headingley. Yeah.
In 86, there was a moment that I actually remember. I was a young lad, but Bruce French was the England wicketkeeper, and he was hit by a bouncer, felled by a bouncer
from Hadley.
From Hadley.
Both playing for Nottinghamshire at the time.
Oh, yeah, I've forgotten that
Yeah.
bit. Okay, teammates. So Richard knew exactly how to get his man.
Saw a weakness.
He would have found that chink in his armour, I think, at Trent Bridge. Anyway, Bob Taylor had retired 3 or 4 years before, and he was entertaining some clients, some VIPs, in a hospitality suite.
Cornhill.
And the Cornhill tent. Yeah.
That's it.
And I'm just telling that you obviously remember the story, and I'm going to get you to take over, but for our listeners and viewers who don't know it, there was the rules and laws, actually, of cricket were very clear at the time that the substitute fielders were not permitted to field in specialist positions, and it was very, very clear. And so therefore you had the situation where the part-time keepers used to take the gloves if the wicketkeeper was injured, and like look around and, well, he's a decent slipper, maybe we'll put the pads on him. But you defied convention and actually defied the laws of the game by giving England permission for the retired Bob Taylor to keep wicket, and it made headlines all over England, certainly, but all over the cricket playing world. Was that? Were you asked? Did you volunteer?
Yes, I was. I was asked if that would be okay. Absolutely, I was asked.
Who asked you? Because it was against the laws of the game.
Mike Gatting.
And was he chancing his luck?
Oh, he was just trying. He said,
Was he taken aback when you said yes?
Yeah, I didn't really think about it too much.
Bob,
to be
Bob
honest,
Taylor was 45.
Yes, he was. I didn't think of that though. Really, if you want a replacement keeper, yep, you can. I think that was the way we kind of approached the game a little bit. We were amateurs. You've got to remember, I was a teacher in those days, and so. While we tried hard and we analysed things and would spend, instead of having coaches as they do nowadays, and you're given probably loads and loads of pieces of paper to tell you what to do, put under your door at night and those things. But we didn't do that. We sat in our, we'd take off our clothes and underwear and that sort of, well, underwear left on, folks, it's all right. I don't want to give you that image. And we would sit in the changing room for hours after each day's play to discuss the difficulties we had today and what are we going to confront tomorrow. And there would be quite, strident arguments put around about how we were going to approach the day. And so the collective argument and all the knowledge that was around in the side would be kind of funneled together, and you would come out with an idea of how you wanted to approach the next day. And that's how, and we became very close mates because of that, and trusting of each other. a great deal, and that's a big thing in a team, I think.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.